Hello, everybody. You can still share the kitten, Chelsea. Oh my goodness. That is awesome.
Yeah, she's new. We just got her like, I don't know, like 2.5 weeks ago, I think. So she's definitely ruling the roost at the moment though. So
Hold on a second. Y'all have asked for the guinea pigs, right? So there's Ginger. She's been in here all semester. She knows everything about property and education and civil rights. I don't think y'all have seen Ginger before. Did I tell y'all you can follow Ginger and Hazel at the Keel Pigs on Instagram? They have many more followers than I do because I don't have any. Uh, so Ginger, you can find all sorts of good stuff and cute pictures, often in Harry Potter gear. Um, so there's Ginger. I'm not going to get Hazel. So one time, hold on, let me put Ginger back. Ginger and I have a special relationship because not this past spring break, but the one before, I had to, I left the family early. They were out west for spring break, and I left early and came home because I had my spring break and everybody else's spring break was different. And so I came back to teach. That was when we actually had to be in a physical space to teach. Now it'll just be wherever. But so I came back early, and then my family got stuck out where they were. So like Ginger and I had several days together, and I had like the dogs. I had several dogs. I was like the only person back in town, and so everybody's animals were with me. But that was especially good for Ginger because I didn't realize that Sadie only gives Ginger um, veggies once a day. And so I thought like you gave them veggies in the morning and veggies at night. And so Ginger refers to me as double veggie guy because for about a 5 or 6 day period, she got twice as many vegetables as she's accustomed to. And so we have a very special relationship and veggies are the way to a guinea pig's heart, I think, in case you guys were wondering about that. Anybody else have guinea pigs? Darius, you have guinea pigs?
No, I don't have a no, I don't have any guinea pigs. But I had a question. You're a vegetarian, correct?
Yes.
How do y'all like consume protein? That's like I guess my issue with it. I wouldn't be opposed. I just how are you consuming protein?
How do I consume protein, or how does Ginger consume protein?
Oh, I was saying you because the lifestyle thing is just
I
vegetarian.
probably, that's a great question. I probably should think about it more than I do. I have quite a bit of peanut butter and a lot of black bean patties, but I'm not particularly watchful. I guess I'm figuring like if I go to the doctor and they tell me there's something wrong, then that's when I'll know that something's wrong, or if I don't feel good. But I don't know. I'm doing okay. No Taylor, no fish, not so much. Um, I'm not like Sadie's a full on like strict as can be vegetarian. Um, I'm not as strict. Although I guess y'all are picking the vegetarian story up from the sausage pizza that my yeah, I remember that. But I don't know. I'm doing okay. But thank you for checking. I don't know where Ginger gets her proteins. I really don't know I don't know anything about what's going on in her body, or Hazel is the other one. Um, in either of their bodies. All I'm supposed to do is give them hay in the morning and keep the the puppy from eating them, and um, just, you know, love them. Just do the love thing. Okay. So what I want to do today is split y'all up. I hope that you were able to sort of follow from the instructions. I wanted you to focus in on one of the articles that I had pulled for today, because those articles kind of represent three, what I would call really hot topics in education reform. Two of them, I think, are connected to our broader um, course coverage, our broader question of, you know, mechanisms aimed at increasing educational opportunities. The other one is more defensive. The school to prison pipeline article is sort of trying to, it's not so much about increasing opportunities to equitable education, but rather about sort of revealing ways in which those opportunities continue to be systematically kept away from students for various reasons in a what continues to be racially disproportionate way. And so in a lot of ways, the school to prison pipeline one is kind of more backwards looking and saying, like, this is kind of what systematic inequitable education looks like today. One of the ways in which it shows up today. And then the other two are maybe more forward-looking about how you might intervene in a system that is still producing inequitable educational opportunities in our communities. And the two are, I guess, if I had to sort of broadly characterize them, one is based on neuroscience, that we're looking not so much on like the sort of performance on tests or reactions in classrooms, but what is the science behind brain development have to say about how you could help close achievement gaps, particularly between students in poverty and students not in poverty. What effect does poverty have on brain development in terms of the ability to process, the ability to retain, the ability to analyze information? And what can we learn about that so that we can see that it's not just that students in poverty, or the argument is that it's not just that socially poverty has an impact on, like, you know, how many books you have in your house or things like that, but that actually, as a matter of brain science, poverty has effects that make it difficult to overcome, for a school, for example, to overcome those effects. That poverty is almost like a poison that can impact a brain development. And then the other one is what I would broadly characterize as wraparound services, that you know, like a thick safety net, that the way to intervene here is not just to worry about the kids when they're in school from 8 to 3, but to actually take the development of a child on from even prenatal up through the age of 25, and provide a social and a health and an educational safety net through that entire period, in order to ensure that opportunities that many communities might take for granted are available more broadly. Okay, and so those are the three articles: one about the school to prison pipeline, and in a way that systemic unequal educational opportunities remain still built into our system. The neuroscience one, poverty as disability, and the argument there, we'll talk about it. And then the sort of wraparound services. So what I want you guys to do is go into, and I think you should be able to do this, go into your names. If you hit the participants tab at the bottom, you should be able to see everybody's names that's in here. And if you do that and you hit more, you should be able to rename yourself. And so what I want you to do is rename yourself with a number in front of your name. So for example, if you are going to do the, if you read or want to focus in on the school to prison pipeline article, put a 1. Okay, so school to prison pipeline, change your name to, for example, 1 Alexa Dennis, your Alexa on the top. That's why I'm using you as an example on the top of my list. If you want to do the poverty as disability article, then do, so it will not let you do this. Yeah, is that what y'all are saying? See, when I hit more, it says rename or add profile picture. For you guys, it doesn't say rename. Well, dadgummit.
I haven't. There's the little the other more button has the thumbs up, thumbs down, and the clapping and the little coffee cup. Maybe you could like use those symbols.
Wait, how about this? Now try it. Can we do it? Yep, you should be able to rename yourself now. Okay, so number 1, I want you to change to, what did I say? School to prison pipeline. 2, poverty as disability. 3, 24/7 school reform. Okay, so I'm gonna give y'all like a minute to do that. That's gonna allow me to organize the breakout rooms if I do it that way, okay? So you can, so Reggie, I see you've got the 3 at the end of your name. Put it at the beginning of your name, because what's going to happen when I get this list is that it's going to list it alphabetically, and so I need your numbers at the beginning. The 1 is school to prison pipeline. 2 is poverty as disability. 3 is 24/7 school reform. Okay. So pick them. And I'm gonna wait for a second. And then let's see. All right, I'm gonna open up the breakout rooms. What I want y'all to do is just discuss the article, right? I don't have any like specific questions, but when you come back, what I would like to happen is for you to, for your group, maybe 2 or 3 members of your group to summarize the sort of the key points from the article and ways in which that connects to our course and any other kind of interesting things that came up in your discussion, right? So that's what y'all should be doing. So you won't have like an assigned leader, but you'll, you know, that'll be what you're, you know, what you're doing in your room. So it will be, you know, Lord of the Flies. Y'all will have to figure out your own structures. Okay, so let me see if I can do this easily. I'm going to manually do my breakout rooms. And 3 rooms. And let's see. Huh. There we go. Okay. Number 1. It's going to take me a second, so y'all can just sit tight. Okay. All right. Number 3, you guys are going to have some, I might need to split number 3 into 2 groups. It's kind of large. So I'm going to split 3. Number 3, I'm going to put 2 different groups. Okay. Actually, I'm not. That's going to be complicated now. So 3, you're going to be bigger. So I'm going to expect more from you. And Emily, Haley, and Jamae, I don't have y'all assigned yet, so stick around. I'm going to open the rooms now. But I need to assign Haley, Emily, Mills, and Jamae. So are you guys here?
Yep, I'm here.
Just going through the chat. Haley, you've got a tortoise? No? Yes, no, maybe. We're back. Everybody's back.
Yeah, he's I think like 6. He's one of the Greek. I think he's either. Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Sounds like she might be glitching.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Yeah, I do have one. His name's Henry.
Oh, I love
He's a Greek
tortoises.
tortoise. They're adorable. He really loves strawberries. Those are his favorite, and hibiscus.
That's good to know for the next addition to the menagerie of animals in the Keel household. Maybe we'll see a tortoise with strawberries and hibiscus. And I did see that you guys recognized how many followers that the Keel Pigs have on Instagram. There may or may not be bonus points if you add to that followers list. So, you know, that's may or may not, right? I can't say that there won't be, but I also can't say that there will be. I actually got a list. So I don't know where it is. Oh, here it is. So I don't know how it came up with one of my first year classes, and I said something to them along the same lines. And the next day I got, I had sitting on my desk from Sadie a list that says extra credit for these were people that she recognized had followed the Keel Pigs immediately after the class, or actually, let's be honest, during the class. So, okay. So let's report out from the groups. The 3 charges were just a quick summary, and also the ways in which it connects to sort of our course questions and tensions and themes that we've hit, and then any other interesting things from your discussions. So group 3, you guys had a lot in there. That was the 24/7 school reform article. I don't know who you chose to be your spokespeople, but I know that you did choose somebody. So I'm opening the floor to group 3 to lead us for the next few minutes through that summary and connections and interesting thoughts. There were 15 of you in there. I, of course, don't know what you were doing in there, but if this is any indication, you were not spending your time wisely. Yes, Darius, lead group 3 out of the wilderness here.
So I probably can't lead, but what I can do is kind of mention who I thought made some great points.
Okay.
One, well, more recently was Chelsea and David. They made some points. I think Chelsea was looking at the situation and was describing it, you know, in an opinion like you got state and federal control, and I can understand you don't really want too much federal control on how you govern things, especially I guess when you think of education. But arguably, when I think about what David stated too, and especially just personal, experience, you look back and how the local communities kind of treat your school environment, you're not really getting it from there. So a national basis seemed like an answer. But those are just things that kind of came off recently from the conversation. But I think we had a great conversation. I would hate for people not to speak up.
Okay. Thank you for breaking the ice. Sarah and Lindsay, You guys want to hop in?
Yeah, I don't think we elected leaders. We just kind of started talking and talked all the way till you kicked us out.
Okay.
But uh, our big focus with the article was like looking at, the connotations. So about looking at, so ours was the wraparound services. And so really big conversations was about how that connected with, the theme of our class and what the purpose of education is. And so I think we came to a consensus that we liked the idea of bolstering more services and to expand the capacity that education can do, such as, looking at these programs that are pre-K, pre-kindergarten, options. But the way the article really laid it out kind of came off a little bit white savory, and looking at the tensions of trying to go into communities with the right intentions of trying to help kids, gain basic literacy and gain opportunities and not fall behind, but also not come off as you don't know how to parent. And here, let me come in at infancy and teach you how to be a proper parent. Because at some point, some of the programs came off as, very ambitious and seemed like very intervening, because we know like the tension of how, how people raise their children and how family structures work is a very, delicate conversation. And doing this type of intervention can have some pushback. And obviously, like, I don't think, unwarranted pushback. So I think our big thing was we liked that, the idea of adding programs, that education has its limitations, and so adding different social services and programs is a good thing. But how you do it, you have to focus on the communities itself, and it has to be a community-led effort, instead of focusing, whereas the article may seem as all these outsiders coming in and trying to basically save the day. And then Renee's big point was, cost. Like, this is a very ambitious cost. How are we going to implement it? Like looking at long term, looking at, is this going to be a national thing? Like, it was going into like some of the programs going into like as basically an infancy and all the way up through the child's educational career, which is a lot of money, a lot of time. And then David brought up a really good point of, trying to help ease the tension of trying to make this these class tensions, was making it more accessible to everyone, where it's not just we're looking at, lower income communities giving these programs, having it as options for everyone. So it's not as seemingly invidious as, middle class and upper class communities and organizers coming into lower communities and basically telling them how to be parents.
Okay. Lindsay, can you add to that?
Can you hear me now? Okay, awesome.
You should just hum, and then as soon as we can hear you, then we will point.
So one of the like specific things that I think we kind of talked about a lot, and like Sarah was saying, we were talking about like the cost aspect of it and the like kind of white saviory, telling people how to live their life aspect of it. And one of the programs was like the Nurse Family Partnership, and where they send trained nurses to visit and counsel poor mothers during and after their pregnancies. In particular, our group kind of got, we didn't love that, because it does seem like you're at a very young age telling them how to raise their baby. But I think that it's absolutely worth it in the end, because language development at those ages, from ages 2 to 4, is extremely important. And the article goes on to talk about like a lot of different programs like this throughout the country, but they're not actually that common.
Yeah, and if either Lindsay or someone else just so everybody else who did not focus in on this article is with y'all. I think it's probably like I know what you're talking about, and so I can understand precisely. But if you could just give a quick summary of like, if you had to say like this is what this article is discussing as a potential solution. I mean, I think it's implied in everything that y'all have said already, but I just for the others who didn't, focus in on this article, if someone could offer just a quick summary or overview.
I would say like giving social services like to students as part of the schooling. So like childcare and yeah, early and consistent intervention is what Chelsea said.
Okay. What else from group 3? Other interesting points. We've had a lot sort of come out of this. Any other group 3 spokespeople? Yeah. So Reggie is saying there's a potential tension here with charter schools. In some ways, charter schools, like if you read up on Jeffrey Canada and the Harlem Children's Zone, they're utilizing charter schools as a way to deliver broader services, but it's they bring up all the same kinds of questions that any other charter school conversation brings up. So Reggie, I don't know if you want to add on to that. I see David's hand is up as well.
I mean, just kind of like building up on further points that we kind of also discussed earlier, just kind of like how, like ideally in a perfect world, like you want to be able to implement like such a much more involved like type of school, but it's also not taking into consideration kind of like the community that's there, like, oh, like we know how our children like learn and operate. And so it doesn't really take that into consideration. It's kind of like the schools kind of coming in, right? We're going to provide these programs for this community, and this is how you should be able to do this outside of school as well. And I feel like that and like we were even touching on that, like most of these teachers probably for the charter school are probably not from the community. So it's going to kind of like create another kind of like added effect of like tension that's kind of like that the students and their parents are kind of experiencing as well.
Interesting. David, go ahead. And while David's talking, if you were in group 1 or 2 and you have questions about this kind of wraparound idea, program, sort of start getting ready to ask those too.
I mean, I think like, one of the white savior, like one of the issues, or a lot of the issues that are presented with that perception, like can be combated with like using like universal design and essentially creating a situation where it's accessible like to everybody, even though not everybody may need, the level of supports, that are inherent in it. But I mean, I think that when you start to frame when you frame these programs as, poor families in, particularly in urban environments, you start to, you run into a lot of perception issues. And as we were talking about, like, people from outside of the community who are putting these in, but if you, change it to, and implement a program that, is designed to be universally accepted, then you take away some of those stigmas and some of those perception issues.
Okay, thank you. Lindsay, you got something else to add as well?
Can you hear me?
I think you're on. Yeah, you're on. You didn't hum long enough.
I was humming. So I think I was just going to raise up another thing from the article. And it was about like, we kind of have an issue with these because they are telling like parents what to do. But like, on the other hand, it's not super telling the parents what to do because the parents are the ones that take their kids home at the end of the day and actually do care for the children. Like with the baby college, which I agree that they could use some rebranding on that. he talks about it's a 9-week parenting program that encourages parents to choose alternatives to corporal punishment and to read and talk more with their children. Like, again, I agree that there should be some rebranding on it and that it should come from the community first. But I think those things are still good because we're talking about children and it's habits that can change the child's entire life. And if you get good habits at ages 2 to 4, we're good. I mean, not exactly, but
Yeah, well, it's
it's a
better to
critical.
have good habits than bad. Alexa.
I agree with Lindsay. I think that it says in here that it will require an even broader cultural change, not just in the way poor Americans think about education, but also in the way middle-class Americans think about poverty. And then I think that's like a really important point, is that it's not necessarily that I don't think poor people don't want their children to be educated. It's just, I think they don't have the time and the resources to expend into their education. And that's why I think that these programs are important, so that they have the ability to gain help and access in a way that they don't have otherwise. But I also think it's easier, I guess, for the middle class Americans to be like, well, it's not a problem that affects me, and my child won't necessarily receive a benefit from it. So why should I expend money and resources for it? And I think that we have to, I guess, what Sierra said in the chat is really important. If you switch it to like a national issue and the global competitiveness of it, people would be like, okay, to progress America forward, try to unite it that way. Maybe they'll want to expend more resources. But I think that's important too. Just an important point to make.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that out of the chat as well. And it's like, that is one of the tensions, right? How do you respect the sort of, you could call it selfishness, or you could call it individualism, but you could call it a lot of different things that we kind of have baked into our system, while hoping, convincing, twisting arms of people to put resources into things that are not directly going to benefit themselves. And I think that's and I think somebody mentioned earlier here, resources, right? The bigger you go here, the more resources that it's going to require. The article is from the election season of 2008, so it's somewhat dated. And so it's interesting to read it for me as each year passes, because you see like the enthusiasm that existed for this type of project in the early years of the Obama administration, for example. It's just not front and center anymore. It still exists, and in fact, in Memphis and in many other communities, they do have smaller versions of the Harlem Children's Zone that is discussed, the Jeffrey Canada operation in Harlem, with just sort of like a full community-wide wraparound with the school at its heart. But it has not been able to be scaled because of resources. They mention in there the Harlem Children's Zone's budget is like $58 million or something, and almost all private philanthropy, not regularized, reliable funding. And so it's interesting to see what I think, and this is somewhat sobering. You look back and you see how much buzz there was. Like, y'all might not remember this, but how much buzz there was about wraparound services and bringing that. I remember at this particular time bringing that to Memphis, and Memphis was going to, and it just hasn't made the impact that I think many people hoped or dreamed that it would. That being said, there's more than there was, in our community and in other communities as well. So Renee, you can have the last word for group 3.
It's not formally as such with this article, but I mean, I think that this sort of idea is still out there, like you were saying, but it's being implemented differently. like right now, I know Loretta Rudd just opened the Early Childhood Center for the U of M in Orange Mound. It's going to serve like 300 kids, and it is for intervention and early childhood services. I mean, that's what she's trying to really do, but it's not connected to any ongoing continuation of service throughout the kids' schooling like this proposes. So I think the idea just kind of got whittled. It's still out there, but it's being implemented piecemeal instead of as a cohesive program now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I also just wanted to reiterate, and I love that y'all picked up on this. There is an element of, middle class assimilationist, please raise your kids like we raise our kids kind of thing that is a tension here. And this is really, really hard. If the data shows that you need to succeed in certain ways that favor, let's say, a middle class or upper income family over a family that's struggling financially, you want to, the inclination to say, well, let's make it so that they can succeed in that way too, right? So it doesn't matter. So your zip code isn't determinative or your socioeconomic status isn't determinative. But at the same time, there is definitely, and I think that several of you mentioned this, and I think it's worth just reiterating, there is this tension between like the way you're doing it is wrong, and it just sort of evinces how little value is placed on the skills and the norms of families in poverty in our education system and in our broader society. That is that those norms and those practices are often viewed as a problem to be corrected, and that is paternalistic in a lot of ways, insulting, and given the demographics, often racist. And so I'm glad that y'all picked up on that. That being said, these are extraordinarily popular programs in communities in poverty because they are thought to be a leg up, right? A leg up to operate and sort of achieve within the system as it exists, right? If we're not tearing the whole thing down, then we got to achieve within the system that we are stuck with. So that tension exists here too. Okay. I want to make sure we get group 2 and group 1 as well. So group 2, you guys had poverty as disability. This was the neuroscience article. And if we could get just a quick summary and then some interesting points and the ways in which it connected to the broader class, keeping in mind that though you guys focused on this one, not everyone did. So let's begin with that summary. Group 2 people.
I can start.
Okay.
I think it actually kind of ties in nicely to the wraparound services and like maybe why they're important argument. But like an overall summary of the article is that it started with the conversation of the exclusion clause that's included in the IDEA that says that the definition of a learning disability within the IDEA excludes a learning problem that is primarily the result of environmental, cultural, or economic disadvantage. So if someone has some sort of learning issue because of basically being in poverty, then they do not qualify for services under the IDEA. So then after kind of presenting that, Professor Ryan goes in and kind of does a run through of relevant and recent neuroscience research that it's not showing causation yet, but there's a correlation between poverty and let's see, he summarized it nicely, specifically like memory function as well as other like cognitive abilities in general. There's a wide variety, and there's even research that kind of breaks down specifically parental nurturing and its specific function on certain memory functions in your brain. And then there's different results that have happened between certain stimuli that are in homes, such as books or words that are spoken or educational toys or going to museums or things like that. How likely is that to have different physical brain development and function results in children's and young adult brains? So kind of went through that, and then suggests taking the exclusion clause out of the IDEA as a kind of short-term solution, and then kind of talks about some long-term solutions, but doesn't offer a lot of, at least in my opinion, didn't offer like a nice stepping stone of, well, if we know that this is true, and we know that students' brains are learning disabilities that are caused by poverty are very similar to those that are just intrinsically there from birth, then what do you do? Because it's going to cover so many more students than it would be just for students who have an intrinsic and a definable learning disability within the IDEA definition. So that's kind of a general summary.
Yeah, great summary. Other group 2 people to sort of build off that with some of the sort of ramifications of the article. Yeah, Heather.
Yeah. So I think my whole group agreed that like the studies weren't shocking, especially like since taking this class, that children in poverty had lower cognitive abilities and testing scores than those that weren't. And I agree with Caitlin that the long-term solutions in the article were very vague, and it left a huge question of, essentially that removing this exclusion clause isn't the answer, but it also is the answer. And we went through in our group some problems with removing the exclusion clause, so like funding, resources within schools that aren't funding. So like to get an IEP or to get help under the IDEA, you need to evaluate individual children for their disabilities. We also talked about stigma and how children in poverty are now being labeled with a disability because they're in poverty, rather than, just being poverty and not being in poverty and not allowing your circumstances to dictate how you're going to do in school. When I first came in to read the article, before I even read it, I was like, absolutely not. Working in the clinic and with the IDEA, I was like, this isn't, it's not fair. It's not rational. It's not logical. And after reading the article, it made a little bit more sense why the exclusion clause should be removed, but practically, I don't think it's possible.
Not possible because you guys haven't said it explicitly, but the effect would be that a student in poverty, presuming that they could demonstrate some sort of effect of that poverty on their school performance, would qualify for services under the IDEA and would therefore have a right to education, right? A right to a free and appropriate public education with an IEP and an individualized education plan. And so there are plenty of students with disabilities, but there are many, many more students that would qualify under IDEA with this kind of definition. And I appreciate y'all's both of your concern that, like, okay, that's interesting, but what are we going to do with it? Do you think that his goal is solving that problem, or is it pointing out the stupidity of excluding poverty as a consideration in looking at what a student is able to do or not able to do?
Yeah, I think his point was just like, what's the research? Let's look at it.
Yeah. Heather, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
No, you're okay. I thought that he was writing the article as a solution personally, even though he didn't offer solutions. I think that was because I think he was writing the article with the idea that he wanted to have a solution and somebody else could come up with that solution for him because he couldn't figure it out. When in reality, and I said this in our group, the solution isn't going to the federal government and excluding a clause in the IDEA to help kids in poverty in schools. The solution is, as we talked in class, is integrating school districts, tax resources, school districts being more flexible, which also is impossible. So it's just like a lose-lose situation.
Others in group 2 or people with questions from group 1 or 3 for the group 2 people? Yeah, Haley. Oh,
if
sorry.
Taylor wants to go, she can.
Well, I just was going to make a comment too. Caitlin shared a really interesting link that she just shared it. That was showing like it shows the poverty levels and the like median income versus the ACT score in that area. So just an interesting thing. And like we were talking about, like where I went to school, they made it so that every kid in every grade got free breakfast and free lunch. That way, kind of to like, that was just like a mandatory countywide thing. And so talking about that as like one thing that could potentially work to like help improve that situation for the kids that are in poverty. And so that way you kind of don't have a differentiating line that, oh, they get breakfast and I don't, and that kind of stuff.
And
Good.
just to clarify, the link that I sent, I changed it from high school to middle school. So now it's based off of the Tennessee state test that students take. So it's percentile rank of that test. And then the colors on the map, if you're looking at it, is median household income.
And so the lighter the color, the lower the income. I'm guessing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct.
Haley?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think that putting, like what Heather was saying, with putting just because you're poor means you have a disability, I think that would create a very bad stigma. And you're already maybe especially as a developing child, you may be embarrassed to go to school because you don't have the same things that other people have access to. And I think just by actually just making the resources available that these kids need to everyone, and then leaving because the students with actual like cognitive disabilities, just leave that for them, because it's already difficult to get some of these things to disabled students. So I wouldn't want to take money away from them when they obviously need it as well, because it would be very expensive to add more to it.
Right. There's a dilution problem if the IDEA funding is now going to be spread among an even larger number of students. And I think that both of these two, Group 3, Article 3 and Article 2, demonstrate the enormity of this problem, that this is not just a school's like, yeah, it's really interesting to decide who goes to what school, or, what program, how a court evaluates which language remediation program is the best. But we're talking about like huge societal problems here that require a lot more than what a school can do. And in fact, huge societal problems, if we're talking about using social science data like in the Brown era, that are impacting what's in our very brains. And that it's not like we are all the same and have the same life experiences. So I think that's driven home in both of these, but especially in this article. So number one, Group 1, I want to make sure you have at least some amount of time here. So school to prison pipeline is the sort of theme here. This is an area that's a little bit different. It's not so much a solutions-based area as oh my gosh, this is how we do it now in terms of infecting our system with inequitable opportunities. So number one, remember the charge is quick summary and sort of connections to the course themes, and then interesting parts of the conversation. So number one, folks, looking for you guys.
I can kind of summarize the article a little bit.
Okay. All right. Well,
So,
I thought you were a number two person, Haley.
oh no, I was number one.
Okay. Go
Um,
for it.
Yeah, so with this article, it's basically talking about the zero tolerance policy that was kind of initiated in schools. But I believe it was in the Bush era. I know it was early whenever I remember it from my school. And it was just saying how at first I was kind of confused because I thought he was advocating for the policy, but then I guess I had read it wrong. But it was just saying that it's kind of leading towards this idea that just immediately getting police involved with these students and creating a juvenile record at such a young age for just the simplest thing or something so minute that they really don't have stand a chance with getting a decent education.
Okay. Thank you. Other number one folks that want to build on what Haley has begun for y'all?
I will. So yeah, as Haley was saying, the article talked about zero tolerance policies, but it also made an argument that education is a fundamental right, which was how we kind of tied it to our course. It discussed many of the cases that we've talked about in this course, like Rodriguez, and it makes the argument that it is a fundamental right, although we know courts have yet to acknowledge that it actually is a fundamental right, just that it's important. And so yeah, it made that argument that it is a fundamental right, and then that the school to prison pipeline basically infringes upon that right through the zero tolerance policies. And then it talks about how it affects students and how there's a disproportionate effect with minority students, and some interesting points. So when we tied it to the course, I at least when speaking, we've kind of focused on the fundamental right aspect. And like the big question that we asked was, I mean, looking at this evidence, it's evident that the school to prison pipeline is real, that it has an adverse effect on youth, and that it disproportionately adversely affects minorities. So our big question was like, why aren't they doing anything? And basically, at least my argument was that I don't think anything is being done because it isn't necessarily, although this article does argue that it is, education has yet to be acknowledged as a fundamental right. And if there is no fundamental right, and then there's no complete exclusion of students, which I think it is an exclusion for these students, but if there isn't like an explicit exclusion of students, I mean, what course could a person being affected by this take to a courtroom? I don't think there really is an option. And I think that's why there hasn't been much done about it, even though there's such a large conversation about the school to prison pipeline. And then I also think because kind of like what you all were talking about earlier, the school to prison pipeline really, for the most part, affects certain youth, and that is minority and poor youth the most. It affects all of them, but it has the most effect on them. And with those groups being the people most affected, I don't think there's a lot of people, how am I going to say this without sounding like a butthole? Because it doesn't affect the majority. There isn't that much happening to change it, if that makes sense. Sorry, I rambled a little bit, but yeah.
That's great. Nope, thank you. Other number one group people to build on these comments?
We also talked about how research shows that the policies, the zero tolerance policies, are not really even effective in creating the safer environments. So it's more about creating this illusion of a safer environment. So then you're doing all of that and it's ineffective, but it's perpetuating like the disproportionalities that Jamae was talking about. So we discussed a lot of that. And then also just involving the criminal justice system in school matters can really lead to impacts on the future educational opportunities for these students, but also on broader things like housing and employment and military opportunities. And expelling children or students in whatever grade so early can really set them on a path to failure in a lot of ways.
Just as poverty can shape a path, so too an early or multiple instances of disciplinary proceedings against you. And I'm not even talking about, when I say proceedings, it sounded a little formal, but it's even like being repeatedly sent to the principal's office or in school suspension, or certainly once you get to out of school suspension and expulsion. These are predictors of bad outcomes. That doesn't mean they can't be overcome. It just means they are predictors of bad outcomes. And number one, folks, to the art. So I also want to repeat the point that Caitlin made right there, which is that there's actually evidence that shows that a school with harsh disciplinary practices has lower achievement, not only for the students that are subjected to the harsh discipline, but also for the students who are not subjected to the harsh disciplinary practices. And so, there's these sort of longitudinal studies of students who, let's say at second or third grade, were scoring about the same. And neither of these two students, and I'm just using two as an example, ended up ever going to the principal's office or being suspended or expelled or anything like that. But one of them went to a school where a lot of students did get suspended, and the other one went to a school where it was very unusual for a student to get suspended. And you look at longitudinally, even the student that never got sent to the principal's office, if they're in a school where students are constantly being suspended, their achievement is depressed compared to a student who's in an environment where discipline is not so prevalent. But the last point I was going to make is who is most likely to be disciplined, right? You guys talked about the disproportionality, and this connects to me back to the poverty issue. Is it students that are like that the system is designed to serve? Like it's designed to serve a certain type of student that learns in a certain kind of way. Who's the most likely to not to be disruptive, would y'all say?
Who's the student who's less likely to be disruptive in school?
Most likely to be disruptive.
Most likely.
Or perceived as disruptive. Let me say it that way.
I'd rather not say it. I'll let someone else.
Haley, your hand's up, and I think that's a leftover. Or maybe it's not.
It is, but I in the article, I know they discussed with, obviously it's the minority. So in general, it was Black kids. So that's what that was what the article was arguing.
So it's either students that you expect to be disruptive because of racial stereotyping, or it's students who, because of maybe they're hungry, maybe they're, they're self, what's the word, like the cookie experiment where there's a characteristic that's you can, like self-control basically, but that's not the word I'm looking for. What is it?
Impulse?
Impulse control. Yes. Marshmallow test or the cookie test. Those are the students that are gonna either be perceived as being disruptive based on just a racial or socioeconomic or both stereotype, or these are students who just are going to not be able to sit still in the same manner. And those are the students with disabilities. And those are the students that are most likely to be picked on as subject to disciplinary practices. And so while it would certainly be impossible legally to exclude students based on those characteristics, race, socioeconomic status, disability status, once they are labeled disruptive, then all of a sudden the exclusion from class, the in-school suspension, all those kinds of things become okay. And they're not, right? The article is talking about, and I think you guys summarized well, the potential impacts that those kinds of decisions have. And so, there's a lot in the discipline space right now as being, the area where, where sort of tracking has gone way, way, way wrong, right? Where tracking it's tracking people out of school or out of classrooms. And it is, like I said, and especially with the focus that we have right now on mass incarceration as a broader societal problem, the roots of that in repeated interactions with school discipline issues, it's very much a connected topic. So, so good. So thank you, Group 1 people. Thank you, everybody, for leading us through this. On Tuesday, we're going to do Gary B, and we will move forward then. So I will see y'all. Have a good weekend. Sorry for keeping you. I feel like I owed you 4 minutes anyway. So there you got them back.
Professor Q.
Yes, Darius.
I just had a quick question.
Yes.
In regard to the response papers, or weren't we supposed to do like a reflection on another person's paper?
Yeah. It's coming. It's coming. I have not sent out any information on that. I've alluded to it, and then it fell through my cracks.
Okay, I just thought, maybe I
haven't missed anything yet.
Gotcha. Cool. That's it. Thanks, though.
Okay. I think Grant was trying to talk, but he's gone now. Emily, Alexis, either of you guys here for a question?